This episode is brought to you by Lumina Growth Lab. At Lumina, we help professional learning and development companies who are struggling with predictable lead flow, a sniper approach to attracting the ideal clients, and a system that qualifies leads so they can have a smoother sales process, finally have scalability, and ultimately take their business to the next level. Most of the time, our clients come to us frustrated because nothing seems to work outside of word of mouth and referral-based lead generation. But with the right strategy and support, they're able to confidently add new channels of lead gen, leading to a packed pipeline that creates sustainable revenue and year-over-year growth for cheaper than ever before because of the use of AI technologies. If that sounds like you or someone you know, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about unlocking your business's potential. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Marketing Matrix, guys. I'm your host, Lisanne Murphy, and today I am joined by the wonderful and talented and super smart, but also down to earth, Louis Lemieux. Well, I guess Louis. I even just said it differently than I said I was going to say it, but Louis Lemieux. Louis, thank you so much for coming onto the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And congratulations on 140 episodes of your podcast. That's truly remarkable. So I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Well, I am grateful to have you be a part of it. And I know that this is going to be probably one of the best. Guys, I had the opportunity to meet Louis, and honestly, I think that if we were in person, we would be like the friends to like probably stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning talking and then look at the clock and be like, "Oh my gosh, like we have to
Is that
sleep so that we don't die. We're not teenagers anymore." We don't. I'm really excited to have my new friend on the show today. So let me take a moment to introduce him, and then I'm going to let him share more about his life experience and what he's doing in work and in life. And I'm just really excited for the conversation. So Louis works for changeforce.ai. He is a seasoned global executive with cross industry experience in venture capital, private equity, management consulting, hypergrowth startups, and top-tier academia. Louis brings a unique perspective to Changeforce AI as a principal. He, having lived and worked across 45 countries with roots in Africa and Asia, he possesses deep understanding of diverse markets and business environments that drive strategic value creation from IPO readiness through enterprise scaling. He's done it all, guys, and he works with teams as well as C-suites with coaching and everything from startup scaling to big M&As and IPOs. Lewis's approach combines analytical rigor with cultural intelligence, enabling organizations to navigate complex growth challenges while building resilient, inclusive teams. He maintains a forward-thinking perspective on technology adoption, strategically implementing innovative solutions that enhance organizational capabilities and delivers measurable outcomes across business functions. Guys, and in the small time we've known each other, I mean, every time he opens his mouth, I'm like, wait, you did what? And you've been where? And you have this background? And like, oh my gosh. And honestly, none of it is surprising because he actually just told me his middle name. And so he's living up to his middle name. So Louis, I'm going to give you just a second, first of all, to tell us what your full name is in the correct pronunciation, and then we'll get going.
I love it. And I said when we first met, it's a name that I've had to grow into, and was terrified if my 7th grade science teacher would say my entire name in front of the class. So my full name is Louis Napoleon Lemieux Le Troisième. So I'm the third of us. And it's like I said, it's a name that my father first asked, "Are you going to name your kid the fourth?" And I said, "No, that stops. The King of France here we're talking about." But yeah, anyways, thank you. It's quite a name. So hoping
I
to live
love
up
it.
to it.
So guys, Louis is also a Napoleon. So, and based on like his track record and everything he's done, he is absolutely conquering the business world just like Napoleon did for all of Europe. So I am just really excited to have him on the show. So again, Louis, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
No, I'm thrilled to be here, and I love your podcast, and so I'm excited to be on this side of it rather than just watching from home.
I love it. Okay, so Changeforce is a newer role for you, correct?
Yes.
So for sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I joined in June, but after sort of 20 something years in the corporate world on the inside, now I'm coming at it from a very different perspective. But yes.
Yes, I love it. So I want to give you a chance to kind of just give some of like the lily pad highlights of that in terms of what led you to move to from the corporate side to the consulting side?
Right. And this may surprise some, and I like the notion of being antithetical and also sort of a little controversial in this reality. But what I realized is that when you're on the inside, as much experience as you have, or whatever it is, and I relate this largely to change and transformation. You know, we've adopted a level with change and the notion of change and how important change is. When you're on the inside of a business and you're leading that change, as I often have been hired to do, what you don't realize is that there's things like legacy resistance to change. There is, an attachment to the status quo. People get excited about change until they realize that the change will affect them in a meaningful way. And then sometimes change isn't so attractive anymore. So where I've been hired many times is to lead that change from the front. So you're sort of standing on the hill, to your Napoleon reference, like trying to conquer this. And you realize that when you look back, there's either a target on your back or there's no one out there with you at the forefront. So the way that I relate this back to choosing to move to an external role, providing that kind of change advice and advisory and implementation, is that I believe I can be more effective without all of the internal realities that sometimes prevent that change from happening. And there's a variety of those I'm happy to talk about, but it's an exciting way of taking my experience from what I've learned on the inside in all these different companies around the world and applying it from a more strategic advisory without issues like politics and other things that sometimes prevent you from being successful inside the business.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So, I'd love to talk about like this concept that like change is kind of like the hot topic buzzword for all leadership. It's like we embrace change and we want to innovate with the market and la la la, right?
Yeah,
But like you
yeah.
say, like when it comes to like actually looking at change in the face, you're like, but there's a reason why I've created this the way that I have. How do you get them to like actually see the benefits of change? Like what happens in the mindset of instead of it just like doing lip service to change to like actually being like, no, this is actually what is necessary for an organization.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a multi-level, multi-dimensional reality. And I think that people take all these different dynamics and they pour it into one vessel and say, this is change. In my experience, it could be everything from the C-suite that need to understand how they can affect that change and why, to, the sort of different aspects of the business and different levels where people aren't they don't truly understand how what they do every day does or does not affect the success of the business. So you've got a lot of different dynamics. You've got history. You've got sometimes a multi sort of global industry that needs to sort of act like one rather than ethnocentrically be one. And so I think it's in some ways demystifying that, similar to AI. So here's a parallel that I would draw. We do a lot of work in AI. 95% of our C-suite says that AI is a reality that they must embrace, understand, and activate with. 5% of those people say they're actually doing something about it. People are worried that AI will take their jobs. The correlation I would make is that when I'm talking about change within a business, I'm saying similar to when I'm speaking about AI, is that sure, AI may replace roles within your business, but that means you have an opportunity to create new roles. You know what I mean? So that it's not just a takeaway, it can also be a give. And so to your question, explaining like what the impact of that change will be in a very honest and direct way, while offering solutions and alternatives and other things to demystify it, and also like to take some of the like anxiety out that would be necessary without explanations of what does this mean to me. That makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. No, I love that. What is the situation? It's like since you've worked with so many companies and across many cultures across the world, can you think of what is the type of situation or position that like when you come and you learn about it, like you start salivating. You're like, "Oh my gosh, I am so excited to help with this issue."
I would say that it's the realization, understanding, and the acceptance and optimism around what that change will bring to the collective success of the business. It's much more difficult to start from a place of trying to educate and almost defend the notion of change to get people up and over that hill than it is businesses that, and like I was speaking to one of our private equity companies this morning, they understand it, they get it, and they're holistically behind it. And so what they've done is they put so many measures that we've been helping them with in place that have activated the entire business so they're all moving in the same direction. So when you have that kind of commitment, the opportunity for results are exponential because they quote, unquote, did it the right way. Now, there's not one way to do it, but honestly, like when you have that kind of transparency and you take, like we talk a lot about psychological safety. Do people have the opportunity to raise their hand and say, have you thought about this? Or maybe the way we're doing it isn't as well, won't be as well received as you think it might be. If people have that space and they're allowed to raise their hand, so to speak, and speak up, it changes the dynamic and it also changes the results. So I get very excited when I can see these different cogs in the wheel moving together in the same direction. It takes time to do that sometimes, but the opportunity for success is so much higher. So I get super jacked about that.
I love that. And how often do you actually deliver what people start engaging you for? Does that make sense? So like, let's say like someone comes to you and they're like, we really need help with this, but then like you ultimately actually deliver something completely different because like they think the problem is this, but it's misdiagnosed. Like, or how often is it totally different versus like, oh yeah, okay, well you need this, we'll help with that. Like, I'm very
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah, I think there's almost like two different ways to answer the question. I think both of them are related, but is sometimes differentiated depending on clients. So when I came out of grad school, I went to work for Ernst& Young, and it was great. It's a great learning experience, but honestly speaking, they deployed us in our mid-20s to be the thought leaders in these massive companies that are trying to enact change. We didn't know what we were doing. I mean, we sort of learned as it went along, but certainly didn't quite, get it. And so I think one of the reasons I'm excited about working with Change Force is that we are all senior level individuals who have sat in the seats of the people that we're working with. So it's much more relatable. It's much more like they can understand and we can understand each other and our ethos and how we operate. That helps to answer the second part of what I created your question, which is that once you build that trust and you have those conversations and you assess whether or not people have the appetite to really, as Cheryl Sandberg, like lean in to what is necessary, and you give them information and they have the buy-in, then you can work different avenues to help them understand that there may be issues that are blind spots for them, and you can do it in a way that is not antagonistic and it's not threatening. What it is informative, and they know that that's your intention. So we often start an engagement with a list of questions, a conversation that ends up with an engagement that is somewhat different than what they expected it might look like.
Change Force positioning itself in the market.
Great question. We say that, we are crucial allies at critical junctures. And that's our sort of our statement of purpose, because people get very concerned about like consulting engagements. They say no one gets fired for hiring McKinsey, but what McKinsey does is kind of affirm what you believed the issues to be. The difference is that we also solve for the issues, or and we can do both sides of that, sort of identify, confirm, and then help you solve those things. And so for us, it's not about a lifetime commitment. It's not about an endless engagement. It's not about, billing all these crazy rates because we need to pay for our skyscraper in Midtown. It's not about, it's not about different levels in the relationship. You are buying us in particular, and we assign the right people to the right engagements. And I think, to sort of reiterate what I said before, we've sat in your seat, understand what the challenges that you have as a CEO. And so whatever, he as CEO really, is struggling with, like, we get it and we can help you from day one because we have the experience and the knowledge. And so it's really calling on us, it's sending up the bat signal and saying, we need you right now.
So is that something like that typically happens like word of mouth, or like people like search for you online, or like how are you like injecting yourself into these critical junctures like you mentioned?
So I would say confidently that 90% of our business comes from either referrals or is repeat business. And I think that the other like 10% is probably inbound leads that we get from thought leadership that we've been involved in, speaking engagements, books that we've written, things like that are lily pads for us to engage with people because they're calling us and saying, I really appreciated your points in that thought leadership piece, and I relate to it because now I understand that's really what we need. So tell us more.
Yeah. No, that's so cool. I love it. Well, and I would imagine that that once a company has like trust in you guys and what you can do, that it's probably a pretty easy engagement to say, okay, yeah, all right, here's the next step of your growth, or like here's the next juncture, like let's help in that regard.
Absolutely. I'm grateful because we have the relationships and because most of the relationships that we have, we're not trying to drag them up over the hill and over the finish line, right? They get it. And so a lot of it, I'm grateful that a lot of our clients are in that headspace. It makes our job much more easy and our collective, engagement together much more successful. So absolutely. It's really a lot about our clients and then what we can offer them. But I also want to make a point about the trust sort of question and issue because as I said before, like we're coming in and our only intention is to help. Like our only intention is to affect what the business really needs on the time schedule that they need it and like the sort of the commitment they have to it. So we're not looking for problems that don't exist in order to solve them in order to like work more. What we're doing is we're a lot of listening and then providing our points of view and we get there together. And so I think that, it's that issue of trust is so critical because like I said before, we also don't have any kind of political agenda or, you know what I mean? And so we are able to work with clients, even competitors to each other, not just signing an NDA, but actually living that NDA. Like we don't need to trade information to make our engagements more successful. And some of these are actually pitfalls that happen on the inside. I was talking to you about that before. The inside of the business, like, people who are trying to justify their seat at the table can often get caught consciously or not trading information, to try to gain that access. It's just a human nature to try to project more of your own competency and capability, and you may not recognize it. We are very thoughtful we share, how we share. And our clients have built that trust because they know that they can trust us.
Huh. Wow, that's really interesting, and I love that. So, what are some of the like you say like you insert yourself at like the critical junctures? Like, what are some of those?
Yeah. So, and there are a variety, and it's like we don't have one. And this is, I think, important too, just from our perspective, because we all agree within that we don't show up with the prescription before we know what the issues are. I mean, there are very few issues that surprise us nowadays, but it certainly does happen. We don't know it all, but we don't prescriptive in that. We often hear about the symptoms and then help guide clients to probably not the best analogy, but the disease, because once you solve for that, then the symptoms go away, right? So we are engaged in a variety of different issues, engage on, sort of change and transformation most often and what that entails. It could be global expansion. It could be like workforce development. And, we don't love to call it training because I think a lot of people has a visceral reaction to training. Like, you've been bad, therefore you need to be trained. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're doing. So we're going to train you. Like we have a whole different language to describe how we engage. And we found that it's much more effective because people are bought in. They're not coming to a training to tell them what they don't know or to ridicule them for their ignorance. No, no, no. We are much more engaging in a way that is less prescriptive. So we have also been engaged in like different periods. Like, we get a call from a CEO that she says, listen, the market has changed. Tariffs have had, for example, a massive effect on our business. And so how do we navigate this at every level? How do we negotiate with this? How do we preserve certain parts of the business that need to be, you know, and then how do our people fall into that matrix as well? And then how do we reassure them? How do we communicate with them in a meaningful way? How do we ask questions that give us the true answers behind what's motivating people and what's engaging them and what does performance mean when there's so much doubt and there's a lot of bad news that comes with that. So these are different. I mean, it really differs in the type of situation, but they're very personal, but they're also very much time bound. You know, we're not looking, again, like I said before, to engage with somebody for no reason forever. You know,
Mm,
we are then the bat signal goes up and we engage immediately from day one, kind of thing. So
yeah, I love
those are
that.
the areas that we're most often involved in.
Yeah, I love that. So like some of the issues that you brought up, like tariffs and AI, these are things where like even though you guys have years and years of experience, like they are recent market dynamics where like there isn't a precedence of like this is how you deal with tariffs, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
like how do you is it a specific framework or is it a mindset? Like how do you deal with issues that like are unprecedented, such as tariffs, AI, and things like that? Like how do you manage change in that kind of environment?
That's a great question. We spend a lot of time educating ourselves. And I think what we do really well is a collective conversation internally often. And so there are some of us that are much more attuned, interested, does affected positively affect a business because they're, you know, my colleague Josh, for example, like he is deeply in the AI space. He was on the forefront of AI, and what he will admit readily, and we admit this too, is that it is usurped, eclipsed, et cetera, him. And even as much as he's engaged on a daily basis on a deep dive in AI and in the communities, in the conversations, working with companies around this, he still admits that he is far from a know-it-all. And so we're constantly engaging in that type of communication. He's educating us in a way that's really helpful and useful to the rest of us, but we keep the conversation going. And so we find different levers to pull that give us access. And we also have a lot of partnerships. We work with a lot of different businesses. So instead of building our business by buying other businesses that do what we do, we're often engaged in partnerships that provide different levels of knowledge, et cetera, and experience that augments our own. And so I'll call like some of our colleagues that are referrals and say, you know what, my colleague Sherry, she does this, this, and this, and she's an expert here. I'm not. So I don't try to pretend like I know everything, especially what to your point about AI and tariffs and things like that that we're not familiar with. We don't try to be overly optimistic in portraying what we do or don't know. We often discuss it internally, but then also reach out to who knows.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so the last time we were on a call, you were talking about the ignorance to arrogance cycle that leaders often get into. And I think it would like going through that would be really, really valuable for our listeners because it really struck me. It's something that I've been thinking about. So can you highlight like how you see that either in the organizations you worked in internally or even ones that you're consulting now? Like what is it? How do we recognize it in ourselves? Like, I would love for you to just kinda talk about that for a moment.
No, I think it's great. And it's funny because the word choice is so important. And there's probably a better way of saying it that's less confrontational, but I call it the ignorance arrogance equation. And so where we found this, and in my personal experience where I've seen it happen the most is with founder. So you have the founder, he or she builds the business. They are fortunate to have a cohort of individuals that are building the business with them. They're bootstrapping it. They're, you know, sleepless nights, like doing what they have to do to, you know, to make it work. And then the business takes off, which is great. And then after years and years and years of growth, what some people believe, and my point of view is that it is sort of the ignorant side of it, is that because they're effective internally, they therefore have their finger on the pulse of the market or what's happening externally or technology or advancement or innovation. So like, listen, like I don't really, and so the notion is I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure I know. So therefore I know, and that's what we should do. And what happens sometimes it's ego and things come into play. And so you have individuals internally that believe fundamentally, without a doubt, that they know what's best. But there really isn't anything behind it except maybe their experience within the business. And so it's a really tough nut to crack because often you're having these conversations with the owner founder and you're saying to he or she that, this is a reality that we've seen in the business, and this is how it potentially could impact the business in a very negative way. Because I think often people confuse longevity with competency, loyalty with capability. And so it's a very tricky line to sort of walk and cross because to my point about trust, it also is highly valuable to have individuals that you work with that you can trust. At the same time, you can't let that trust blind you from what needs to be done and what needs to be innovated and what needs to be solved for. And you can't be forward looking when you're so ingrained in the way you've always done things. I mean, how many times
Mm.
have we heard that? Why do it that way? Well, because we've always done it that way. Like, is it the right way? Like, I don't know, but I'm going to be confident and bullish that it is because that's what works internally. And when you don't ask yourself the question of is that really, best practice? Is it really like just because you know how things work internally and you've been successful at working internally does not mean it could, but it does not mean universally that that is best in practice and or otherwise. I see it a lot in like banks or PR companies. Like there's differences in how that plays through. Banking companies only hire people that have been in banking. The PR businesses that I've been involved in have this, and for lack of a better word, like incestual recruiting cycle. They will recruit somebody from their competitor. They might bring that person on, for a little while. The competitor or someone else recruits that person back. But what you have to ask yourself the question is, what are we really bringing back? How are we really advancing? Like, is this someone who can really challenge our status quo and be innovative and come up with ideas that no one else did? And so when you marry in things like AI, that's when things can become very tricky, very toxic, very challenging for people because they're so committed to the way they've always done things and they don't really know any better.
Yeah, so interesting. Like my natural question with that, because like obviously, because I mean, I have a growing business as well, and so it's one of these. But well, I'll ask my question. My question is this: um, where's the balance between like iteration and change versus like having something that's like stable and like it's humming along and working, right? Because I'm sure like you could swing the pendulum, like so you kind of like shared like the pendulum on one side of like where it's like we're so stuck. Why do you do it this way? Because that's the way it's always done. This is how it is, son. Versus like the other end is it's like what else is new? What else can we try? How do we change this SOP? Blah blah blah. And it could be chaos, right? So like
Yeah,
how do
very
you
quickly.
like where's the balance in that?
Yeah, it's that is one of the trickiest sort of engagements that we have because you can also get so excited about change that you're just making change happen for change's sake. And then so that can completely disconnect like a lot of your workforce from your intention. And I think, for example, I see this in so many different ways with companies that are like challenged with intergenerational communication, which you wouldn't necessarily think would be relevant to what you're saying, but it actually is. Like, so there's a perception by Gen X that Gen Zers want your job like tomorrow, and they're not willing to work for it or educate themselves, or like they want advancement, they want to move ahead. And so what I've seen companies do is create different levels within the business to promote people just because they think they're satisfying them. And often they're not paying them anymore. They're not giving them any kind of like authority or decision-making power or anything else, but they're just satisfying, they're shutting them up for a period of time. Well, as you might imagine, that doesn't really work, A, but also B, it makes your business overly complex. And then it also puts these cogs in these different wheels around performance because people don't really know what's expected of them, how they realize they're smart people. They realize they've just been promoted for no reason. And they've been promoted into a job that didn't exist before and it was purely created for them to advance but without any kind of education, without any kind of development. And so now it's like, I always say, like, what's the best way to get rid of your best employees? It's to promote them into a job that they're not capable or willing or able to do. Like, say you have 5 engineers and you say to your chief engineer, you say, you know what, in order to advance, you need to manage the other engineers. And maybe she doesn't want to. Maybe she's an individual contributor and she's good at that. But then you put her into that job as manager because it's the only way to advance. And what happens? Within 6 months, she's the worst employee you've ever had, and you spin her out of the business. So congratulations, you just got rid of your best employee. Ta-da!
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
things like that. You don't always think that there's this connection between all these disparate elements of the business, but there really is. And so part of our job is to highlight those things in a way that offers like a solution to them, and sort of sometimes putting the mirror up, and it's not always pretty, but it does come from the perspective that is singularly interested in your success. I have no other agenda for bringing these things up. I'm not trying to make your life more difficult. I'm not trying to confuse things. I'm not trying to judge you for doing what you did. I'm here to help you unwind what doesn't make sense and then connect the dots so that people are performing, to the best of their ability.
I love that. So good. So good. Okay, so you strike me, Louis, as someone who is a great learner and thinker. Yeah? Are you someone that like you enjoy learning? Are you how do you consume knowledge? Are you a podcast listener, a book reader, a documentary watcher? Like how do you intake knowledge?
Yeah, I love that question. I think it comes from a variety of ways. I'm very visual. So for me, I mean, somebody could talk me through something and I'm going to miss it. Like, I think one of the benefits of getting older is realizing sort of what you're good at and what you're not, and like how you take in information. I love, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited to be here today. I love podcasts. I love watching the interaction between people because it gives me so much information that is helpful. Sometimes it actually highlights something that I'm challenged with myself personally. You know, I'm not always patient. Like, I always want to have a plan. But then I realize when I'm watching these podcasts and listening to people speak or reading thought leadership papers, I realize that there's benefits to that, but there's ways in which that holds me back. And so for me, I'm constantly learning by understanding other people and asking a lot of questions. I often have conversations for a long period of time, and people are like, wow, do I know anything about him? Because all I did was ask me questions, which they were happy to answer. But it gives me so much information, and I cherish that. I learn so much more about myself through like watching and being engaged with other people. I can
I
never,
love that.
I could never be an astronaut on the Mars lunar mission because it just wouldn't work out for me. I would be crawling on the walls. Yeah.
I'd be crying almost every night. I love it. Are you working with a particular mentor then for growth? Like what like with that foundation of like your curiosity being a big driver for your personal self-discovery? Like, is that leading you more down the road of mentorship or reading biographies, or what does that look like?
I would say predominantly it's mentorship and interaction with people. I used to really struggle because I think it was sort of like my own self-worth that I struggle with in terms of like asking people for their time, asking people for help, asking people for their opinion, not knowing like what I would do with it or like what I sort of could do with it. I've really been grateful to the people that have given me so much of their time, like altruistically, like they just really don't have, a dog in that fight, so to speak. But and I've reached out to people, but I think when you ask, that gives you so much more of an opportunity to have that person say yes or no. And that's okay. Either way, like, I don't have time for this, Lewis, or like, I really do, or tell me what your interest is. And a lot of the people that I've interacted with, which again, so fortunate and grateful for, is that they too share this passion of learning more. Like, we're not done learning. We're not done figuring it out. And to your
Hmm.
point earlier, there are curveballs that happen all the time that, I'm not always prepared for them, but you know what? Like, I'm willing to understand what I do and don't know and find someone to ask who does. 9 times out of 10, that works out beautifully. And I've also become much more interested in helping other people. And that sort of like, if I knew then what I know now, but you know what? Let's help them know what we know now. Like, we don't
Mm,
have to. We don't have to protect it. We are not less valuable if we share what we do. And I think as a strange, maybe curveball in this conversation, ageism is alive and well in America. And I think what happened was this notion that people who are older cannot innovate. And so the pendulum swung very hard to one side. And there was a bunch of people that maybe were younger, less experienced, et cetera, that were given the keys of the kingdom. And now they've seen how that's worked out. I mean, certainly bright, innovative, we would never have been able to understand what these people have brought. But you know what? We need a little gray hair. We need to know, to your question previously, that change isn't always great just for change's sake. If you're changing everything all the time, you can be like completely dismantling, you know, the ability of your company to succeed. Know when to change, know when not to. And I think that balance between innovation and experience is really the critical component of what we seek to do in our business all the time. And in me personally, in general.
I love that. I love how you took like your personal learning style and somehow wove it back into like the philosophy of like how you approach your work at Change Force AI. Quite brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, I remember when I met my partner now was early days, and I was over at his apartment, and I had a video call with the UK, and so I was scrambling around. I said, "Oh, can I have where's a paper and a pen?" And the look on his face was extraordinary because he didn't have one. Like he didn't need one. And then another time I said, like, do you have a printer? Where's the printer? I don't have one. Where's the stapler? I don't need one. And there's not that much of an age difference between us, but that like 15 years, let's say, like it's been such a learning experience because his whole world evolves around much like a greater efficiency, less, encumbersome in terms of like a printer and a this and a fax and a blah, blah, all the things that sort of I grew up needing. And I take my notes because like I have a pad and I take my notes every day in every way. But that's not necessarily how, he or that Generation Y, is successful. This is all, by the way, within one lifetime. This is not, like intergenerational with gaps. This is not your father's Oldsmobile, as I like to say, right? This is reality. But some of those things you just don't know when you're encountering them, like how and what to think. Am I a dinosaur because I need a printer? Who needs to print? I mean, I don't know. Anyways, again, unexpected curveball in answering your question, but it's really what also answers the question of yours, which is sort of, how I learn and grow and how I challenge myself. And that I think has a fundamental positive effect on our clients when we engage.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and there's value of, like looking, like generationally speaking, like looking forward and back, right? In terms of like the lessons that can be learned from the different lenses and the orientations that we see the world through,
Absolutely.
I love it. This has been so, so fun to dive into this conversation. Louis, I think one of the biggest things that I appreciate you is you have an amazing power of observation and curiosity.
Thank you.
And I can tell that the observation, because you've been given so many different opportunities and platforms to be in so many different environments in your life, like you've taken that in and assimilated it into your own world, so then therefore you can help people that maybe haven't had as diverse an opportunity in their life, but you can still grant that wisdom and that knowledge, which I think is really, really powerful. And so thank you so much. So anyway, I hate to cut this conversation because I feel like we're almost just getting started, like we have in our last few conversations. But for people that want to learn more about you, follow you, or find changeforce.ai, like how do people get in touch with your world?
Thank you. Our website is changeforce.ai. There's a lot of information on there, case studies, examples, etc. I think the other way is on LinkedIn. So I'm Louis Lemieux on LinkedIn. And
Not Louis, Napoleon, Lemieux, Napoleon.
that's all right. Yeah. And so I relaunched my Twitter/X. I haven't done that yet, but I will be. And so, yeah, well, and I'll sort of add more to my LinkedIn profile in terms of like opportunities that I've been asked graciously accepted to speak and or write about or think about or talk someone like yourself's ear off about.
I love it. Well, guys, I'm going to put those links to Lewis's LinkedIn as well as Change Force's website in the episode notes, and so you can link to those directly. But again, Louis, thank you so much for just bringing your all today. Guys, wherever you are and wherever you're listening, we know that your time is valuable. So for you to be able to be willing to spend a few moments with us just means the world. So again, until next time on the Marketing Matrix, thanks so much, guys.